Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third round of the HAPS grant interview process. I'm Dr. Joshua Bowen, and here at Digital Hammurabi, my wife Megan Lewis and I started perhaps the first ever crowd-funded research grant entitled HAPS, Humans Against Poor Scholarship. There is a great deal of poor scholarship here on YouTube, in social media, and in our day-to-day interactions with others. Our goal in establishing this scholarship was twofold. First, we want to make it easier for PhD students to do new and exciting research, producing good scholarship. However, that new and exciting research often remains out of reach to normal, everyday people. This brings us to our second goal, to make this new scholarship not only available to everyone, but in a way that is understandable. To this end, each of our applicants are asked to give a live interview where they will pitch their proposed research project to you, the audience, who will then vote on the projects that you want to see funded. We've been fundraising since August of 2018, when we hoped to raise $2,000 to fund one PhD student's summer research project. However, viewers have been so generous that to date, and this is the correct number, we have raised $4,515.51 via Patreon and one-time PayPal donations. So we've already exceeded the $4,000 mark. And as long as our Patreon pledges do not decrease substantially, we will have received over $6,000 by June. This means that we can securely fund 2 students with a high likelihood of being able to fund a third. This is all down to you, our viewers. Thank you. Now, remember, it's not too late to contribute. All donation information can be seen in the description of this video. Any donations made after August 2019 will go toward the fund for the HAPS Grant 2020. Anyone who contributes gets a say in how the money is used. After the final interviews have been completed, you will have the opportunity to vote for the scholar whose research you find most appealing. We have a total of 17 applicants, an amazing response. 3 have since removed their applications, leaving us with 14 applicants to interview. All of the interview dates can be found on our website, digitalhammurabi.com/calendar. Interviews will follow this format: 10 minutes for applicants to introduce themselves and pitch their project, 10 minutes for discussion, 1 second for me to turn the alerts on my phone off, and 10 minutes for questions from the audience. If you are watching live and you have questions, please put them in the chat and tag @DigitalHammurabi to make sure we see them. In order to make sure all applicants are treated equally, we will be very strict about the timings. So please get your questions in early to make sure that we get them. Today, we're interviewing Natalia Matuszewska and Sarah Fein. First up is Natalia, an Assyriology student from the University of Wrocław. Second is Sarah, a Hebrew Bible student from Brandeis University. So I'm going to make sure that the other alerts are turned off. And I am going to unhide Natalia and bring her in. All right. And if you want to unmute Natalia, you're ready to go.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Maybe, yes, I can hear you. Maybe one thing, my last name is Matuszewska, but in my in my email is my previous last name, Borusiewicz.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
No, don't worry.
Well, we will get it right. Well, how are you doing?
I'm fine.
Good,
and
good.
Now maybe in Poland is 5 p.m. and rainy day, but anyway, it's nice.
Well, very good. Very good. Yeah, it's a little rainy here as well. So, well, Natalia, why don't you go ahead and again, this is very low pressure. So just take your time. We've got plenty of time, and actually, we're starting a little bit early here, so hope that's okay.
For me, it's okay.
So you just go ahead and take all the time you need, maybe 10 minutes or so, and just kind of tell everybody about who you are, a little background about yourself, how you got interested in the field, and then oh, hi, Sarah. So I'm going to hide you from broadcast for just a second. I'm sure there's a way that I can do that beforehand, but yeah. So just kind of give a background to yourself, and then talk about your research project, and if you got the money, how you would use it, and what you would do.
Okay, so can I start now?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, so hi, I'm from Poland, from Europe, and I'm PhD student from Wrocław. And tough question, who I am. I was thinking about it maybe last 3 weeks, but I think first of all, I'm a mom. I've got a 2 years old boy. But in second place, I feel like I'm a serologist or historian of medicine. But anyway, how I became a serologist, it was, I think, completely a coincidence because I studied on Wrocław University of Technology, and I would like to become a biotechnologist. But after or during the studies on, can I?
No, you're good. Sorry, there's a.
Something.
This is my wife, Megan.
Hi, sorry everyone, I forgot to set this up properly before we started. You're good.
Oh, yep.
So anyway, okay.
I'm so sorry to tell you. Go ahead.
I started my second studies, and it was classical philology. And there I met my supervisor, and there were classes about Akkadian language, and I thought I will try it. And after I tried, I fall in love in Assyriology, and my bachelor thesis was about anti-witchcraft ritual maklu. My master thesis was about Nergal, and now what I'm doing now is I'm researching medicine or medical aspects of Mesopotamian people, and I'm focusing on pharmacopoeia and some technical point of view because I've got a quite huge knowledge about chemistry, biotechnology, chemistry. No, chemistry too, but also about a little bit of medicine. My husband is physiotherapist, and I've got a consultant at home. Recently, I published a note in Nabu, and it was about magical stones used as medicine or a remedy for headaches, and I think they could work. Anyway, I would like to do something more, and I would like to research one text during the summer project. It's BAM 480, and this is the best preserved text about therapy, and this is also about ways of therapy of head or headaches. And I would like to go to Berlin. From one point of view, the sources, but I mean books anyway, articles. I don't have those things in Wrocław or even in Poland. Yes, but it's normal. And what else? I would like to also go there because recently they had finished a PubMed project. So in Berlin, there are quite a lot of specialists about ancient medicine, and I could talk to them just in person, and it's absolutely something different than emailing. And also the money could help me buy some books. They are not cheap, especially from my point of view, because my currency is it's not pounds, it's not euros and dollars, so it's like 3 to 5 times more expensive than for you. But anyway, I'm trying to find some sources to work, and it is possible, but it could be, of course, easier with money. And why I love to be a seriologist, because I can still work with thinking out of the box, and I absolutely love it. And also I teach math, so from my point of view, this is a great exercise in in the twofold way. I am better mathematical teacher, and I'm better assyriologist because I teach math. And why Babylonians and other people? I'm absolutely fascinating about their thinking, way of thinking, especially in medicine, because it's so reasonable that I think there is, maybe in our modern world, we reached to this point maybe in the 19th or 20th century. And is my point of view. How many of you saw bacteria or virus? I saw, okay, because I had great microscope in my hands. But anyway, what caused the illness? Something invisible, something maybe, of course, powerful, but invisible. For them, it could be God, it could be demon, but I think it's the same. It was maybe something super natural and had a great power, but the point is the same. It was something invisible. For us, okay, we know it's what it is. They thought it was God. But anyway, the way of thinking is the same. And this is fascinating for me. And I'm also trying to find maybe some hints for us. That's why I was focusing on these stones in one point, because I think they did something what we today call the trigger point therapy. Maybe some of you tried it, or maybe not, but I think it's absolutely something what we can read, what we can consider, and maybe not in this strict way, but use in our thinking of medicine. So for me, it's a kind of base of our culture, and something like this. And maybe it sounds funny, but I would like to be an assyriologist to feel maybe a little bit like Indiana Jones, because to know something absolutely maybe I think extraordinary, but of course almost no one knows what I do. But anyway, it's fascinating for me. I'm almost 30, and when I was a child and teenager, of course, I was watching Indiana Jones and so on and so on. So I think it's maybe some kind of dream, and I'm trying to makes my dream come true. It, of course, it isn't always the easy way, but I think I'm happy, and I would like to anyway to do this even after graduate. I have no idea if it will be in academia or not, but in some point, yes, I've got some ideas about teaching, maybe even Akkadian or Sumerian, but we'll see in 2-3 years how it will be. But anyway, I'm now here. I'm trying to research, and also my PhD will be focusing on pharmacopoeia and therapy in ancient Mesopotamia. And maybe I will stop. I stop here.
No, it's that was actually really, really great. I think it was a good summarization of what you're doing, and no, it's I'm always interested. Not to sound too cliche or anything, but I'm always interested in these types of studies that talk about science and medicine, because I don't have, a background in that. So it's always interesting to gain a little bit more of an understanding. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Maklu. If you're okay with that. You probably, you don't have to go into depth, but Maklu is such a fascinating, the ritual itself is just so fascinating, but I would imagine that most of the people watching don't know about it. Would you mind summarizing briefly what Maklu is? If you're not prepared to do that, that's totally fine. We can talk about something else, but
I can try anyway. It's a quite huge ritual, and it was a ritual for someone who was touched, or let me say touched, by a witch. But we didn't know who it was, and it was quite long. Also, ritual lasted whole day or whole night. We can say something like this. From the I don't remember, from afternoon or evening till the next day. And there was a lot of things to do, and quite many small rites to prepare to do by a sheep or kind of another, even we can say doctor, because it's the same, let me say, guy as in medicine. I think, to summarize it, it was 3 main points to destroy the witch, and it at the end the patient should be also clean and protected by another attack. So it's very huge summarize of Maklu. And it also has a connection with medicine, because the medicine and the magic are inseparable in Mesopotamia. So for me, it's maybe natural to those two things from our point of view, but absolutely one from them, their point of view.
Excellent. So maybe that would be a and it's cool to hear that you published a note in Nabu. Nabu is for those watching, it's a series that are brief notes that a seriologist they study something and they come up with a little nugget, I guess, of information, and then they publish it. It's very brief, usually very short, no more than I've seen maybe 3 or 4. Yeah, but it's usually very short. But it's neat to be able to to get in Nabu. I always love just sort of leafing through it to see what new stuff Assyriologists are coming up with. Would you talk for a minute about? So I applied for a Fulbright scholarship when I was in coursework. I mean, in my PhD program, and one of the questions that came up over and over again for me, I ended up going to Tübingen, to Germany. And one of the things that came up over and over again was, why do you need to go? Your tablets aren't over there in Germany. They're definitely not in Tübingen.
No, in Germany.
Yeah. So my tablets weren't in Germany, but they would ask me, so why do you need to go to Germany? And I said, well, I want to study with Konrad Folk. And because Folk works on the tablets that I work with, and he's a brilliant German scholar, and European scholarship is very different. But it was always kind of a hard case to make to people, because they didn't understand, well, why we have like email, we have phones, you can call and talk to them. So could you talk for a minute and let the audience know why it is that it's so important for Assyriologists, particularly in your case, because your tablets are there, but why it's so important to actually go to that museum, to be around the other scholars that are working on these tablets. Can you just talk about that for a couple minutes so that everybody understands?
Yes, but from my point of view, the main problem is I don't have specialists in Poland. So maybe I can talk to my supervisor, but he's also not a specialist in medicine. So just to have people, okay, we've got emails, but personal contact is something completely different. I was in Prague, in Czech Republic, and I had classes with Dr. Prosecki, also a great Assyriologist, and just few times I spent with them 1 or 2 hours, got me more than my whole classes from the academic language. So absolutely personal contact and talk to each other, and even the opportunity to express something to to real life person is something completely different. And maybe it sounds maybe not cliche, but I really don't have books, articles. I don't have many databases in Poland. So and they've got almost everything. So to, to go there, even if even without maybe make any appointment with anyone, it's just an opportunity to go to the library. It maybe sounds funny, but probably if you are from Europe, it's easier to understand. So uh, mm, so this is the point to meet someone. I hope in September I will go to Prague for a conference, and the opportunity to meet other Assyriologists, it's fantastic, and talk to them, meet them, maybe even introduce myself. So to for once to make a contact. So something extraordinary from my point of view, because my diploma says I'm a classical philologist, but I feel I'm a Assyriologist. So in Wrocław, there is no Assyriology. Maybe I will create a really good place at university for me as Assyriologist and not a classical philologist. And I'm working and I'm trying to do it. So it's not easy.
Well, I think it's so important to be able to, to be able to go and to, in a sense, immerse yourself, because there's a disconnect. No matter how hard you try, even with, things like FaceTime, and it's just when in Tübingen, we got to go up to the castle every day. That's where the library is. And so to go up to the castle every day and to just sit there among the stacks and to have the professors walk by and to have little conversations with them and to go out to dinner. And there's just something about being able to interact at that level. It's so important to be able to travel and to be able to go to these places.
And sometimes one sentence, it's, oh, I've got a new idea. You told me something, I thought about something, and wow, and it was it.
Yep. And the other thing is you establish these relationships that last the rest of your career, and that's extraordinarily important. I'll ask one more question, and then we'll get to the audience questions. But I'm interested to know about these stones. So
Okay.
You talked about trigger point therapy. I don't know what that is, and I suspect
That's good.
Yeah. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the stones, how they were used, and maybe what trigger point therapy is, just so that we can all. Of course, the audience probably knows, right? They probably know. It's just me. So
It's not so easy. I know because of it, only because of my husband. Okay, that's the truth. We've got the trigger points on our body. It's very hyper-irritable spots, and when they do something like this, muscle became very strict, they cause pain. And the way of therapy of it is to make a pressure on those points to release them. And I think those stones could work in the same way. It was something like make that stone, and that stone. It was important, the types of stone, but not from my point of view. And I think they No, they bind it to head, but I think it could be like this, or from my point of view, more like this, because in this point on our body is trigger point which makes a pain here.
Oh.
So if we release this point, we can feel better because of the tension headache, but we can feel here. So that's why I think it could work. I have no idea, of course, but I think it's very reasonable. And if they did something like this, it should work for them. Maybe not each time, because you need to press the right point of the body. So maybe it wasn't easy. They didn't know about it, I think. But we did the same today, and I had this therapy, and because of this this problem with headaches, and I know it works now, and I think it worked in past, and I hope I will find someday something more about I would say physiotherapy, but anyway to help people not via medicine, but a physiotherapy itself. And I can try to research this in-text. And my husband said, okay, let's do some medical trials. So maybe someday I will do something like this.
Oh, that's awesome.
But
oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think many years.
Yeah.
I need to prepare it and reach funds.
So let me ask you, and then I promise I'll get to the audience questions. What period, just so that everybody kind of understands what period you're working in? Are you working in second millennium, first millennium primarily? Is it more of a diachronic study?
It's first millennium, but it's not so easy to say it's first millennium because the texts are from first millennium, of course, mostly from Ashurbanipal library. So it could be older, but we've got them more or less from this point. We've got some older sources, so I can compare them. But anyway, it's let me say it's first millennium or a little bit older.
Excellent. Well, good. We've got about 7 minutes. And let me look at my phone here where Megan has texted me people's questions. If you have questions, audience, please tag at Digital Hammurabi in the side chat, and Megan will get them to me. Beej Price, she asks, has she any ideas of bringing back these ancient remedies as alternative healthcare? I think you talked about that a little bit, but maybe are there other areas that maybe you think could inform? So you talked about the stones. Do you think there are other areas that you might run into that we could say, oh, this is something that we could bring back?
I hope, really, because the pharmacopoeia, I hope it can give us opportunity like this. I mean, the ingredients of medicines, maybe there will be something what we can use as a medicine or as something in cosmetics, because I know if you know, it's something like this. We are just guessing in modern cosmetology, biotechnology, and trying to find something in some, for example, plants. So it could be a hint where to find something or in which way it could work. So I hope, okay, it's a huge dream, okay, but maybe there is something to find, and I hope it is. But
excellent.
Okay, I'm not the only specialist to find it, so I could be the first to read something, and the other people like doctors, biotechnologists, someone like biologists or chemistry department can find it from this what I found.
I think this is something that is really important to remember for those watching. It's always obviously ideal if we, like an individual scholar, find something and that's the end, right? We figure it out all the way to the end. But that's often not how this works. So I think about scribal education, for example. I wrote on some aspects of scribal education. Well, that was a process, trying to understand understanding Mesopotamian, Sumerian, and Akkadian, particularly Sumerian, scribal education in the 3rd and early 2nd millennia. It was something that took decades and a host of scholars to figure out, because somebody would figure something out and then another scholar would come along and tweak it and build on it, and then somebody would make a big breakthrough, and then somebody else would come along and hone some of the aspects of it, and then finally, but this is how scholarship works, right? And that's why these types of projects are so important, because it's possible that maybe you find something and it's not the end, right? It's not the final answer, but it's the catalyst. It's that first step that leads us down that road. And so I think these types of projects are so important for that reason, because it takes, you said it earlier, thinking outside of the box. It takes coming up with those sort of innovative ideas and going down that road and failing here and failing here, but then you get to this path, and this one is the one that you can actually go down. And so I think that's fantastic. So intellectual iconoclasm, he asks, which math subjects does she teach?
All. I teach math about Polish students, and but also in few weeks I will try to use a Babylonian calculator with my students at university. So I will find what it will work. But now this is just the idea. But during the weekends, I teach students and pupils modern math.
Excellent.
I will say something like this.
No, math was never my strong suit, so it's I'm always amazed at how well people can do it. So, well, Natalia, we started 5 minutes early, so I don't want to keep you longer than we said we'd keep you. But we've got about a minute and a half left. Maybe you could just take a minute and sort of summarize and make one last pitch to say, here's why you should vote for me.
I don't even think if you should vote for me. Maybe there will be some project, some better project. But anyway, I think about my research as a base for other researchers, and I think I will do it anyway, some way, somehow, some day. But I hope it will be some fundamental knowledge for next generation or next scholars, and I hope something interesting just for people, because medicine in past was interesting in general, so we can see how it worked. And I think that's it. I would say vote for the best project, and I don't know if it's mine.
Excellent.
No, to be honest.
Well, Natalia, thank you so much for coming on, and I think you did a fantastic job. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Well, that was great. Now we have Sarah Fein, and Sarah, I'm gonna Show you in broadcast now. And if you want to unmute, you are all set.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
All right, great.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing really well. So I got my coffee and only
helps.
2 interviews today. So it's a light day. Light day for
How
me.
many did you have yesterday?
There's 4.
Wow. It's a lot.
But it's good. You know, I'm just, I know I keep saying this, but I'm just so excited about doing this because I don't know. It's this position allows me to sort of, I don't know. I feel like Megan and I are kind of like conduits to get all you guys and all this new scholarship and all this great stuff that you're coming up with. We kind of become the platform for you to get it out here. So I'm really excited to have you on. So
I think even the process of like amplifying these different projects and this like really cutting edge stuff that's going on is really great. Of course, I would still appreciate, the funding, but I think the process of it is also really valuable.
Well, I'm hoping, I mean, it's sort of to put all my cards on the table for everybody that's watching. We're trying to figure out a way to become like a nonprofit organization, which would make it, much more beneficial to those that donate. And of course, then we wouldn't be taxed on the money. But, at any rate, sorry, that's neither here nor there. But, if we've raised, if we can fund 3 people without having, any type of special incentive for people to give necessarily, I'm really hoping that we can, do things like offer postdocs to people. I think it would be fantastic. But
that would be
one step at a time, I guess. Yeah. Well, Sarah, I've cut into your time. I will make sure that I give you those 2 minutes back at the end.
Sure, not a problem.
But why don't you go ahead and take 10 minutes or so and kind of introduce yourself and talk about your Hebrew Bible studies and what you're all about, and then your project and what you're going to do with the money.
Sure. So hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, or Sari Fein. I'm a 5th-year PhD student at Brandeis University, which is just outside of Boston in Massachusetts in the U.S. I know you have some folks who are not from inside the U.S. And I primarily study the Hebrew Bible and early Judaism. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this conversation about the ancient Near East, because my work spans, I would say it is birthed in the ancient Near East, but it grows to the later areas of Second Temple Judaism and late antiquity. So thanks for letting me sneak on. What I'm primarily interested in is the role of women in the Hebrew Bible and what a feminist approach to the Hebrew Bible can tell us about women in the text. So feminist approaches to the Hebrew Bible, feminist biblical studies, can look like a lot of different things. Some of the questions it might ask are simply, where are the women? What are they doing? And why would ancient authors have written them this way? Why would they make them say these things and perform these actions? And so my work starts there. And my current project, my dissertation, is on the reception history of women in the Hebrew Bible. So what that means is that I look at how early, later communities, I should say, specifically later Jewish communities, who take the Hebrew Bible as a sacred text, how they interpret women's roles in the Hebrew Bible, and I'm specifically looking at mothers. You have a lot of mothers in the Hebrew Bible. Most women who appear are mothers, and that is partially due to the patriarchal nature of the society that produced this text, and the realities of the ancient world. Motherhood being a primary social role for the vast majority of women. And so later authors in both the Second Temple period which is a long period from about the 6th century BCE to the fall of the Second Temple in 70 CE, when the Temple and Jerusalem were destroyed by the Romans, and late antiquity, which sort of picks up where Second Temple left off and goes from about the 3rd through the 7th or 8th centuries. There's a lot of text production happening in that time in Jewish communities. And when I say text, I mean both written texts and visual texts, so visual art. So there's, and they're using as a source the most important text, which is to them the Torah or the Hebrew Bible, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. So you see a lot of different ways that the Hebrew Bible is, the stories of the Hebrew Bible are interpreted. It's translated into other languages like Aramaic and Greek, and of course, all translation is interpretation. So things get changed, sometimes accidentally, sometimes subtly, and sometimes in really significant ways in translations. There are new texts that are produced that are based on texts from the Hebrew Bible, such as the Book of Judith. And you have, of course, the entire corpus of rabbinic literature, which is produced mostly during late antiquity, which produces both legal texts, right? How do you live by the laws of the Hebrew Bible in order to have a holy life and create a holy community? And what I'm more interested in, which is midrash, or agadic midrash, which basically means narratives or stories, right? The retellings, interpretations, explanations, additions of these narratives that are originally found in the Hebrew Bible. And so there's all of this wonderful text production happening. And what I'm specifically focusing on is what these early Jewish communities do with mothers. And they seem to locate mothers as a really rich site on which they can kind of work out their the different anxieties and values and changing social norms and priorities that they're experiencing during this really interesting period in history where most Jewish communities are under Roman rule, and they're no longer, politically autonomous. They don't have their own government, and they're living in multicultural, multi-religious communities where the competition for followers is fierce. So they have a lot to work out, and a lot of that happens like on the site of biblical mothers. Excuse me. So that is what my dissertation investigates. And so I'll just say briefly what the text that I'm focusing on, in case anybody out there is a fellow biblical scholar and interested in it. I'm looking at, so my working thesis is that mothers who appear in the Hebrew Bible quite often as protectors of the vulnerable, often their children, are reread in the Second Temple period and late antiquity to be protectors of the community. And then I read 3 texts that sort of complicate this. So I look at, I know you have some background in Bible, so I hope you'll indulge me in going into a little bit of detail on this. Hannah in 2 Samuel, 1 Samuel, who is barren and wants a child, and she sings a song to the Lord. So it's a piece of poetry, and that is picked up in an Aramaic translation of her text, and her poem becomes this sort of apocalyptic prophecy against the so-called enemies of Israel, which is really interesting. Rachel, who is an important matriarch in the Hebrew Bible and Jewish tradition, however, she dies in childbirth, and she is picked up both in later texts in the Hebrew Bible and in later rabbinic tradition, as sort of this paragon of a grieving mother whose grief actually gives her power. And in a text that I'm looking at, Lamentations Rabbah, it gives her the power to actually stand up to God and convince God to return the Jewish people to the land of Israel. And then finally, I'm looking at the women of the Exodus, only one of whom is a biological mother, the biological mother of Moses. But there are several women who appear playing very significant roles in the first couple chapters of the book of Exodus. And they all sort of take on maternal roles in order to protect Moses, who of course will later become the leader of the Jewish people and lead them out of Egypt into freedom. And Moses doesn't quite make it to the land of Israel, the promised land, but he almost gets them there. So lots of wonderful stories, lots of really fascinating women. And I would be extremely grateful for the financial support of this grant. For, I think, reason than some of the other candidates. I am not planning any travel this summer. I have done a lot of travel to go on archaeological digs in Israel, to travel both nationally and internationally for conferences. I actually just came back from one last night, and I think it's wonderful and important. What I really need is financial security so that I can focus on actually doing the research and writing on my dissertation this summer. As I mentioned in my application, I have a 21-month-old. She's absolutely wonderful. But I'm her primary caregiver. Her father's in medical training. My husband is in medical training. And so I'm her primary caregiver, and I'm a poor grad student. So we need the financial security to do the basics like pay our rent and pay for childcare, so that I can work this summer and actually get some stuff done. And for me, this is a feminist issue. It's an issue of gender equity. Women are still, by and large, the primary caregivers of if they have young children. I'm competing both in my program and in the larger academic world with other people who don't have children or whose spouses, are the children's primary caregiver. And I'm trying really hard not to have it all, but to do things that are still really important to me. And if men can have children and careers and be famous biblical scholars, then why not me? So I am hoping for some support in the name of feminism. So thank you.
Well, I think that just to sort of piggyback on that a little bit, so that everybody understands this, that's not. Yeah, I don't think you have to apologize, or even nobody should think any differently about your request for the funding, because your position. Look, PhD students don't have money. It's like what we're known for.
Yeah.
And part of the difficulty with a lot of the programs is that it's really problematic. One of the reasons that I'm so excited, and I've used that word like 1,000 times since we started this, but one of the reasons that I'm so excited about this is that we're getting the importance of the humanities out there. Right.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so many humanities departments are having to fight, having to say, no, we are important. We're just as important as like engineering,
mm-hmm.
and medicine and all these other, we're important too. And unfortunately, because many humanities departments are considered sort of, that's nice if we can have it.
Mm-hmm.
Funding is much more difficult to come across. And so even though, our Megan is getting ready to, she's putting her last big push on her dissertation now, I think she's in her 8th year.
Wow.
We have funding for 5 years. And then after that, it's sort of like, figure it out,
Yep. Same with us.
It's tough. it's
really
tough. And so, no, I don't think in any way, I think everybody should realize that your request for a scholarship or your need for scholarship funding is just as important as anybody that's traveling somewhere else. I mean, this is a very difficult thing to do. And the point of this is to make it so that research can go forward, however that needs to happen. So I just wanted to make sure the audience knows that this is also very important. So
thank you. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of women, my department in my field tends to be male dominated. And even, I won't say it's a glass ceiling, but it's sort of like these glass stairs. Like as you get up to higher and higher levels, women tend to drop out because the demands on both financial and, emotional of, having families and being in demanding positions tends to fall on them a lot harder. So I guess it's related to it's not quite the same, but it's related to what you were saying about needing to fund the humanities. So thank you for saying that.
No, and I mean, look, I don't. If people think that there are people that are going to watch this that are going to think, oh, the laws are the same for men and women, so it's just as easy for a woman to do something like this.
Let's have a conversation about that.
I mean, yeah. Guess what? If you think you need to read a little bit, because I mean, of course, I'm very. I find ourselves very fortunate that I have a full-time position and Megan can, do her research. But even without the financial struggle, we have 3 kids and, one of them's a year old. And so just trying to make the time to sit down and write is extraordinarily difficult. And I'll be honest, everybody watching, my time going through my PhD program was 3 times as easy as hers. And the reason is that I was never the primary caregiver. And so it meant that if I needed to stay late in the library, if I needed to get up early and go, I could. I don't know how she does it. I don't understand. I don't understand. So
I'm sure she's amazing.
Yes, no question. Strong, independent women. Gotta love them. I know we're going a little far afield here, but guys, if you don't have a strong, independent woman, I don't know what you're doing. All right, you're missing out. So let me ask you a question. Sort of coming back to your project.
Sure.
We've talked a little bit about the formation of the Pentateuch in particular, but all the different theories that are out there. How much does that play into? I mean, I suspect a lot. Because you almost, I would imagine, have to come up with a fairly grounded theory of the Pentateuchal formation, because you're having to then identify. I would imagine, I don't know this, but I would imagine that you'd have to say, well, I think that my hypothesis is, or I'm going to base my research on, I think that this is a post-exilic text that I'm reading here. So how has that struggled? Is that true? First of all, have you had to sort of put a stake in the ground to some extent to do your research? And if so, how difficult was that?
Yeah, that's an ongoing struggle. And people, much smarter than I have, staked their claims and struggled with the same thing. So it's something I'm still working on. But the overarching idea that I am working with is that is very influenced by Ava Marczek's book, The Literary Imagination in Jewish Antiquity, which is a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, pick it up. And it furthers this idea of a sort of open canon in the periods which I study. And that's very beneficial. It's both great and it's complicating, because you can't stick a pin in the Hebrew Bible and say, okay, well, at this date, by 100 BCE, it was finished and closed, and it was considered sacred and authoritative. And anything that came after, which of course we can very safely date, is clearly an interpretation or a derivation. It just didn't happen that way. The borders of the canon, at least for some sections, especially the prophets and the writings, which are, the not Torah parts, not the first 5 books of the Book of Moses, continue to be very fluid throughout this time. And so what ancient authors were doing was not necessarily saying, I am interpreting a sacred book and my work is going to be secondary or helpful to understanding that sacred book. But they might have conceived of themselves as contributing to this canon on something that was on equal footing. And so that is something that I'm still working on, like really, really clearly articulating, because when you're working with texts that are produced during this time period, when, again, the borders of the canon were not closed and when it was very fluid, it's quite tricky. So I think you've identified kind of a heart of something that I've been wrestling with.
And I think that people need to wrestle with that more. And when I say that, I mean, not so much in academia, because I think we all realize the struggle is real.
Mm-hmm.
But see, one of the things is I interact with so many people here on YouTube that I'm so glad that everybody that we bring on here that works in the Hebrew Bible says, yeah, it's really complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It would be wonderful if it were written by a guy named Moses and it was just, all put together there. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Life would be so much easier.
Yeah.
But, it's a lot more complicated than that. And we end up banging our heads against the wall a little bit. And that's, that's just the reality, the tension. So then before I get to the audience questions, see, I'm like, this is my time. So what types of interactions do you have? And I think this would be, good for the audience to hear about with New Testament texts. Because, this is the heart of the period, right? And so when you think about, I don't know how much you get into the canonization or even the formation of the New Testament texts, but is there a lot of interplay that you interact with when you think about, or when you work on these texts? Is there a lot of New Testament interaction that you deal with? And if so, I think that would be interesting for the audience to hear.
Yeah, there is certainly some. And obviously the New Testament texts are a product of this period. And they can tell us, just as much as Jewish texts about the different communities who lived during this time. My main interest in New Testament texts is what can they tell us about Judaism in this period, because that's my primary interest. But of course, there are many valid questions to ask of the New Testament text. So, for example, I am working on a paper that I shared at the Enoch seminar last summer, which, again, wonderful seminar, wonderful conference. If you don't know it, look it up. Get involved. It's great. On how the statement in 1 Timothy that women shall be saved through childbearing, which is a really enigmatic statement. What does this mean, saved? Are we talking about survived? Are we talking about saved in the sort of theological, salvific sense? And through childbearing, what does that mean? Does that mean childbirth? Does that mean child rearing? It's a huge puzzle that people have been trying to solve for centuries. I looked at that and how it related to some rabbinic texts on that actually curse women with death in childbirth for not observing certain mitzvot, certain commandments that are specific and particular to women. And part of the basis for that argument was that Jews and Christians didn't necessarily know they were supposed to be two separate communities in late antiquity, and there was a lot of interaction between them, including, Jews who would go into the church to worship, and Jewish Christians who would continue going to synagogue, and this resulted in sharing of texts, sharing of theology, sharing of values. And so I think that the New Testament texts, one of the ways in which they are incredibly rich and valuable is telling us about Jewish communities and their relationship with Christian communities during this time period.
Excellent. This is fun for me.
I'm glad. Me too.
And it looks like we've got a number of questions if you're
Great.
good to answer some.
Absolutely.
Okay. Intellectual Iconoclasm asks, how closely were the female cleanliness laws adhered to through the periods listed? No pun intended.
I just got it.
Yeah, it took me a second too.
That's a really great question. How closely were they adhered to? So first of all, if people aren't familiar with the, I forget how the author phrased it, the women's cleanliness laws. The laws of Nida in Hebrew, or menstrual purity, according to rabbinic texts, involve sort of a woman completely separating herself from her husband for the period of time which she is menstruating, and actively bleeding red blood, and for several days after. There's a period of white days that she has to observe, and then only after immersion in a mikvah, a ritual bath, can she kind of resume contact with her husband, and not just sexual contact, but any sort of physical contact, including, to some extremes, even sitting on the same chair, right? Then they can resume and have physical contact and sexual contact. So how closely were they observed at this period? That's a great question. And I don't have the answer to it. I was told it was okay to say that.
Yes, absolutely. I say it all the time.
But I think in general, the more stringently, an authoritative text insists upon something, the more we can assume that there were people who were not observing it, or observing it in ways that were not considered kosher, so to speak. And in general, it's hard to say how much weight rabbinic texts had during this period. For example, I do some work on synagogue art, and there's plenty of rabbinic texts that talk about, not creating human figures or likenesses of God. And you can go into any number of synagogues in the land of Israel or the surrounding areas and see the hand of God in a scene of, in a biblical scene, depicting, the figures from the Hebrew Bible. So some communities just did not get the memo that they were supposed to be listening to the rabbis. And, there's a very valid theory that rabbinic texts were sort of intellectual exercises for the elite that didn't necessarily have the same sort of impact on everyday people that perhaps they would have liked, or perhaps, we as historians imagine. So I don't know the answer to that specific, that particular rabbinic injunction, nida, or menstrual purity, but that's a great question.
Yeah, that was a good answer. Boy, we have a lot of questions. I think we only have time for one more, though.
Sure, so. I'm sorry. I can try to be more brief.
No. So Beej Price asks, has she looked at the apocryphal books for the roles of women?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Excuse me. So apocryphal books are books that are not within the canon. And of course, every religion has their own canon, their own set of, again, sacred and authoritative books. Judaism has its own canon. Protestant Christianity has its own canon. Greek Orthodox Christianity and Catholicism have their own canon. So apocryphal books are books that may not be in one canon, but they might be in another, or they might be in none. And I think there are some really, really fascinating things we can learn there about women, especially since those books tend to be more narratively detailed than some of the texts that you find in the Hebrew Bible, just given the literary styles, the contemporaneous literary styles. The Book of Judith, that's an apocryphal book. That's not part of the Jewish canon, at least. And it's a, I don't want to say retelling, but it is perhaps inspired by, just a chapter in the Book of Judges about a woman named Yael who sort of lures an enemy general into her tent and then murders him by driving a tent peg through his head. And in Judith, you get a fun twist where she actually beheads him with a sword instead of driving a tent peg through his head. So, artistic license. But I think what those apocryphal retellings can tell us is what texts resonated with these communities that were producing these texts, right? Why did they choose this chapter of Judges and not another one to dedicate an entire, multi-chapter work to? Like, what was exciting about that? What was rich about that? What resonated with their particular, priorities and fears and values in that time period? I think they're really wonderful resources.
It's probably the name Yael.
Yeah, that helps.
It's funny. When I learned modern Hebrew, I learned it through a course called Hebrew So Simple.
Okay.
And Yael was a prominent figure. And is Yael and David who were interacting. And there's this one line where Geveret Kohen, the nosy neighbor, comes over and she says, "Oh, matematika, yofi Yael, hu chacham." And she says, "Ken Geveret Kohen." And but Yael is that name always resonates because it's
it's got some pretty you get a nice image in your head when you think of Yael. My daughter's Hebrew name is Miriam Yael, so her story resonated with me.
Indeed.
Cursed or blessed my daughter with it.
Well, we have gone 30 minutes, and I want to give you that one last shot to kind of make a pitch and tell people why your project is important and why you should get the funding.
Sure. Well, thank you everyone for listening. I'm sorry I didn't get to all of your questions. I would really, really be grateful for the opportunity to continue telling these women's stories. They were important enough for, early Jewish and even early Christian communities to retell, to make their own. I want to continue telling their stories. And as a woman scholar in biblical studies, I would also be very grateful for the little the boost so that I can amplify women's voices as well.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. And we really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully be talking to you again soon.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Take care. Well,
there you are, everyone. 2 more interviews, and this is going to be tough. That's tough for me. So Natalia, fantastic, clearly fantastic scholar, and of course Sarah as well. I just, this is going to be great. I'm really, have I mentioned that I'm really excited? I don't know that I have, but anyway, I don't think we have any interviews next weekend, but the weekend after, I think, is our final round, and then after that, the patrons will be, we're going to set up a type of survey. I've told you more than I understand. But Megan is working on that to make it so that you get your votes in. So if you haven't become a patron, if you haven't donated yet to the fund, do so now, so that you get a voice and you get to say, I want that scholar, I want that project. Because remember, the ones that you pick not only get the funding, but they come back, right? They come back and give another presentation of their findings. So if you want to see them again with their project done, Get your votes in. Get your contribution in so that you get a vote. Okay. Until next time, thank you for watching, everyone. And until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?